welcome to this Engineers Ireland webinar. My name is Andrew and I work on the membership team looking after the area of professional titles. For this session, we are going to be looking at the Chartered Engineer application process. So we'll be looking at the standard route, we'll also look at the further learning route, and we'll briefly touch on phase one of the experiential learning route. So in order to kind of determine what route you're on, please double check your membership grade first. And if needs be, there'll be an email at the end provided if you're stuck on anything or if you have any questions, we'll be able to find that out for you so you can confirm your correct route to a professional title. Before we get into the application process itself, I just want to do a very quick recap just on your membership benefits and make sure you are maximizing and I suppose availing of all the benefits available to you. So by, I suppose, watching this presentation, you are interested in hopefully achieving a registered professional title. And that in turn would be about getting recognized in your field and attaining that internationally recognized professional title. But it's also about the learning and developing and availing of all our CPD offerings. They'd be both online, in person, hybrid events. And in turn, then it would be a great way of kind of growing your network, creating contacts. So on our section of our website, we have what's called sectors, and sectors are broken down into our regions, divisions, and societies. So with our regions, we have 12 regional branches throughout Ireland and overseas. So we would always recommend that you are affiliated with at least one of these. You don't have to be living within a particular region to be affiliated with it. As I mentioned a moment ago, a lot of these different sectors, they're running not only in-person events, but also online and hybrid events. So you're able to avail and access all of the events that are run by these different regions. And similarly with our divisions, we have a range of divisions available to you as a member. Similarly, if you have any interest in events that are taking place in a different division outside of your own area of work, by all means, you are more than welcome to attend those events, whether it's, as I said, online or in person. And similarly with our societies, we've 11 engineering societies. A popular one on the right is our Young Engineer Society, and two recent additions to this area of our sectors is our Inclusion and Diversity and our Executive and Business. So not only are we always looking for guests for these events, but we're also looking for volunteers. So if it's of any of interest to you to volunteer for any of our regions, divisions, and societies, you can reach out to them directly. With our publications, if you're unaware, we have everything from weekly and monthly newsletters, which are our Connect and Engage, to more kind of annual based publications like our salary survey. We've our engineer's journal, which is of course multidisciplinary. And I'll show you in a moment how you can double check to your membership dashboard what benefits you are availing of. And with our LinkedIn account, obviously this isn't a member benefit, but LinkedIn is a great way of keeping up to date with the organization. Everything that happens in the organization gets funneled through our LinkedIn, from interesting news articles to job postings to online events, hybrid events, in-person events taking place in Clyde Road and around the country as well. So in addition to our LinkedIn, our events page would also have everything that's happening in the organization. So it's worth noting that in 2023 alone, out of all the new members who joined Engineers Ireland, over 52% of those were classed as a global engineer. And a global engineer is someone who has graduated outside of Ireland and the UK. And that's increased from 48% in 2022. So because of that growing trend, we introduced the Global Engineers series. And this has been proving hugely successful year on year. And we would target different regions, different nationalities. And as you can see, this is how 2024 looked so far. And we just finished up there recently with a Cork event targeting European engineers. And we'll be finishing out with two more events for the remainder of the year. So we're always looking for attendees for these. They're hugely popular, and we always have guest wait lists for these. We also have really interesting speakers. We have companies attending, embassies attending as well. And you can find out more of these on our YouTube channel as they are recorded. So if any of you watching this are yet to join Engineers Ireland, it's a very straightforward process. And to apply for a professional title, you do need to be a member. So there is a short online application form, and you'll find that now on the Join Now section of our website. We are a qualifications-based membership body, so with all applications for membership, we do need a verified copy of your qualifications. and there's a team on hand that will take you through your application for membership. There's a payment fee involved to become a member. And step four, then, all applications or membership are sent to what's called our membership and qualification board. And based on their outcome, they elect you to a grade of membership. And then that in turn then determines your route to a professional title. So you can see here the different pathways we have for membership. We have those with accredited qualifications, and we have those who have unaccredited Irish, unaccredited EU, non-EU. We have qualifications that are related to engineering, and those who maybe have no formal engineering qualifications but have those relevant years of experience. And you can see here what those qualifications we accept that are related to engineering. So as I said, when you make an application for membership, that will be the first step you need to do in order to apply for a professional title. And there is a team on hand that will take you through this process. So that aside, that would just cover off the joining process, our membership benefits. If you have any questions on that particular part of the application, at the end of this presentation, you will see an email that you can reference and apply to if you have any questions on any aspect of your membership, and we'll be able to help you out with that. So the main kind of aim of this presentation, I suppose, is to look at the Chartered Engineer application process. And I suppose a good starting point would be around the question of why become a Chartered Engineer. So you can see on that green diagram there on the right, the multitude of reasons as to why you should achieve a professional title. But those 4 points in the top left, they would be what are kind of key pieces of feedback or what we're getting back from members who achieve this professional title. So not only is it a way of achieving professional recognition, but the Chartered Engineer title is internationally recognized. So we have international agreements with certain countries like Canada, Australia, New Zealand. So if you achieve this title with us and you decide to travel abroad for a couple of years, to these countries, you can get that title mutually recognized. So it's giving you kind of that global passport, and it's a huge advantage to have by attaining this title with Engineers Ireland. In addition to that, it's about getting that badge of excellence and really that seal of approval amongst your peers. It is a peer-reviewed process, and also not getting the seal of approval amongst your peers, but also getting it from your employer. And in turn, then obviously it's a great way of maximizing your career opportunities. So in order to apply for a professional title, as I mentioned a moment ago, you need to be a member with Engineers Ireland first, and that would have to be in place for a minimum of 3 months before applying. Secondly, you're going to have the prerequisite standard of engineering qualification, and we'll look at those in a moment. Thirdly, you're going to have built up the relevant work experience that's going to allow you to demonstrate the competences of a chartered engineer. And finally, you must demonstrate a minimum of 35 hours of CPD per year for a minimum of 2 years prior to you applying. Now, as the slides progress, we'll go into a bit more detail on each of these to hopefully kind of answer any questions that you might have. So recently we launched new regulations and guidelines, and these will all be downloadable on the Chartered page of the website. So now we have a new regulations document that combines all three routes. But as you can see there, we have three individual guideline documents that looks at the standard route, the further learning route, and the experiential learning route. So these are, as I said, recently launched, and they target each individual route. And the previous documents, they've been completely transformed and overhauled. So you'd be pleased to know that there's a lot more guidance given, clearer guidance, a lot more examples given, and these should really be utilized when you're applying for a professional title. So as I mentioned a moment ago, double check your route to professional title first, and then download the relevant guidelines document for you. Please familiarize yourself with your particular guidelines document and ensure you understand each individual section. It tells you clearly what you need to do to complete that particular section of the application. And all that's required of you then is to slot in those roles, those key projects, to help you demonstrate that individual aspect of the application. So please make sure before beginning the application, you are fully up to speed with your individual guidance document, in addition to using the regulations document as well. And also on top of that, then we have our discipline-specific competency documents. So these are also downloadable PDFs that you'll find on the Chartered page of the website. And these documents have been combined using examples from engineers who have previously achieved the title. So it's a great way of understanding what types of examples were being used and how you can start to think about what projects, what key roles you're going to use to benchmark your own experience against the competency section of the application. So to give you an idea of where you can access all these resources on the homepage, under membership tab, you'll see Chartered Engineer. So everything that you need to submit an application is here, from explainer videos to these new documents that I mentioned. The new regulations documents are there. And as you can see, those 3 individual guidelines documents are there, and the essay titles. So all downloadable PDFs. We have a range of podcasts that are available to you. We now have a document that looks at the professional interview, and we've launched recently a guidance video that looks at the role of your supporters. And we have a range of testimonials and a few other resources available on that page. So this slide here looks at the 3 individual routes to the charter title. So before we kind of look into this in detail, again, it's not something that you or I decide. This is all based, as I mentioned a moment ago, upon your educational background. So as you can see, there's a standard route, there's a further learning route, and there's an experiential learning route. So 3 routes to the charter title. And as I said, they're based on your qualification or your educational background. So taking the standard route first. Standard route applies to anyone who has an accredited level 8 degree that they achieved pre-2012, or if someone has an accredited level 8 degree plus an accredited master's post-2012, they would be either a route for standard. So those 2 are the type of applications or the type of member that would be applied to the standard route. Standard route applicants focus in on what's called phase 2 professional development, and that's what we're looking at in today's session. Outlined in green then is our second route, and this, as you can see, is called the further learning route. Further learning route applies to anyone who has an accredited level 8 degree that they achieved post 2012. So essentially someone who didn't go on and achieve an accredited master's, they just have that standalone accredited level 8 degree post 2012. They would be what's called on the further learning route. They also complete phase 2 professional development, but the one difference is that they just have 3 additional essays that they need to do, which we'll have a look at in a moment. So that is the only difference between standard and further learning route applications. As I said, they both complete phase 2 professional development, but the one difference between each of these is just they have 3 additional essays that they need to do. That's all. Outlined along the bottom then in yellow, as you can see, is what's called our experiential learning route. And on the left there in the bottom left-hand corner, you can see the variety of engineers that will be coming through this particular route. And we'll look at them again in a moment. But it will be someone who has an unaccredited level 8 degree, they might have a level 7, but they may have already achieved the associate engineer title, and then are looking to move forward and apply for the chartered engineer title. These types of engineers will be coming through what's called their experiential learning. So experiential learning, and again, we'll look at it in a moment, but broadly speaking, for experiential learning, there's 2 phases. There's phase 1, educational formation. And as you can see, this involves an application and an interview in itself. And when you pass phase 1, you then move on to phase 2, which, as I said, is what we're looking at in a bit of detail here today. So if you look at experiential learning route, or how to kind of access and know what route you're on to a title, when you log into your membership dashboard, you'll select My Professional Title. If any of you are seeing this notification in the bottom right, it more than likely means that you're on the experiential learning route and you have yet to pass what's called the initial assessment, which is step 1 in the process. If you select My Professional Title and you have an online application, it'll tell you whether you're on the standard route or on the further learning route, or you're on the experiential learning route and you've passed the initial assessment. So all applications are online. They must be completed online through your membership dashboard. As I mentioned a moment ago, for all our sectors, so all our regions, divisions, and societies, all our publications, to double check what your benefits you're availing of, if you select My Interests there, you'll be able to see if you're following any regions, divisions, and societies. So just make sure after watching this recording, you are availing of all those benefits, and you can just double check those different sectors that you are affiliated with. So just very briefly looking at the experiential learning route, just to give you an idea of what it looks like. So in experiential learning, this is looking at phase 1 of the process on its own. So phase 1 involves an initial assessment, And when you pass that initial assessment, which is a Word document that's emailed out, you then move to your online dashboard and you would have the full education assessment application. So initial assessment, as I said, is a mini kind of Word application that is emailed out. You submit that to our membership and qualification board. And when they grant you approval to proceed with the full education assessment application, you would do so online through your membership dashboard. And when you pass the assessment, there'd also be an interview. And when these three sections are complete, you move on into phase two, which is all about the competency section of the application. So as I mentioned there, please note that this is just for experiential learning route. Standard and further learning, we'll look at that in a moment. So as I mentioned a moment ago, there's a variety of engineers who will be coming through the experiential learning route. And you can see here, you would be eligible to apply under this route if you've qualified from an engineering program that was accredited by Engineers Ireland as meeting the educational standard of an associate engineer, and you have 10 years of engineering work experience. So that would be one scenario. The second would be that you've already achieved the professional title of associate engineer and you have over 7 years work experience post achievement of that title. You might have qualified with an unaccredited qualification at level 8 or higher and have over 8 years of engineering experience. Or you might have no formal quals, but you've over 15 years of responsible experience. So as you can see, there's quite a variety of engineers that will be coming through this particular route. So with the 8 learning outcomes, these form the main kind of aspect of phase one of the experiential learning route. So the 8 learning outcomes, as you can see there, are on screen. And in the guidelines document, it breaks each of these down into kind of main definitions and really kind of explains how you're going to benchmark your career against each of these outcomes. So for the initial assessment, which is a Word document emailed out, you need to provide 8 200-word statements on these learning outcomes. When you pass the initial assessment, you'll have access to the full online education assessment application, and you'll then need to provide 8 1,000-word statements. So again, for anyone who's on experiential learning, before writing on any of these learning outcomes, please download the guidance document and make sure you're fully clear and up to speed on what each of these 8 learning outcomes are. And then when you have access to the online application for phase one experiential learning applicants, this is what your application would look like. And I'll go into a bit of detail on each of these sections as the slides progress for all routes to title. If someone's on the standard or the further learning route, this is what the application would look like for you online. So as I said, all applications for all titles are completed directly on your membership dashboard. So you can see this is someone who has not started any particular section of the application. So you can change these over from not started to draft, and then from draft to ready to submit when you're ready to apply for a professional title in advance of a deadline. You can share your draft with your supporters in the bottom right. So that would give your supporters the most up-to-date PDF version of your application so you can get that feedback from them. And in the bottom right then, as I said, you would be signing off on it directly on your dashboard in advance of a deadline. So we'll look at each of these sections here today just to give you an idea of what's kind of involved in completing these. The first one there in the top left, interview location. And we'll look at it in a bit more detail in a moment, but for that, it's just a drop-down menu. You're literally selecting online or whether you want an in-person interview, you select the location of where you want that interview to take place. The next 3 sections are also tick boxes. So areas of expertise, engineering disciplines, and areas of activity. So these are just screen grab of some of the fields that are available. There are plenty more for you to choose from in the application itself. We ask you to fill out these sections so that we can match you up with your interview panel. So we ask our interviewers to also fill out these sections so that based on both of your backgrounds, that peer review panel have direct experience with your career. And so that's very straightforward. So that's 4 sections completed already. The 5th section, as you can see, is your career summary table. So as I said a moment ago, again, before you start each section of the application, just revise the guidance notes to make sure you are completing it correctly and to the best of your ability. So the career summary table is to be completed in chronological order. So graduation to current date. So companies you worked with, your start dates, your end dates. If you don't know the exact dates, the first of the month is perfectly fine. You need to be then putting into positions you held within those organizations. And then as your career evolved over the year, what were those roles? What were those responsibilities? So really giving kind of a broad top level overview of your career. So you're kind of introducing it to your assessor and hopefully to your interviewer. Supervisor details, name and job title is perfectly sufficient there. Don't confuse that with your supporters, which we'll have a look at in a moment. So your career summary report is probably the first large section of the application that you'll come across. So it's a 2,000 word report. If there is a word count above a text box, you see it clearly noted of what it is and what your word count is. There is a buffer of plus or minus 5% in each text section. So please make sure that you keep within that plus or minus 5%. If you're excessively over or under, your application can be returned. So similarly to the table, your application for this part of the process is in chronological order. So please make sure that at all stages of this application process, that you make sure that you keep to the forefront of your mind that this is an application about you and your career. So while that might seem quite simple to mention, you have to make sure that this is all about you and your career. So while you all work as part of teams and organizations, where people fall down in the application process is that they're not showcasing what significant engineering work they themselves were involved in. So always keep that to the forefront of your mind that you're using first person terms, first person statements, really honing in on those personal contributions, those responsibilities. Did you encounter problems? What solutions did you find? What judgments did you make? So keeping that to the forefront of your mind in all sections of the application and also later on in the interview process, which I'll explain in a moment. That last point there is applicable across all sections of the application. So please make sure that you're paying attention to your spelling, your grammar, your punctuation, and syntax, which is how you form your sentences. So make sure it's clear, concise, easy to understand. If there's excessive spelling errors, grammatical mistakes, punctuation errors, your application will be returned. It is a professional application, so make sure you double, triple check that before your application is submitted. Similarly, with any acronyms, any abbreviations in any section of the application, they have to be here in alphabetical order. So again, it's a reference point for your assessor and your interviewer to refer to. So make sure, again, like checking your punctuation and that sort of stuff before your application is submitted, that you check for any acronyms or any abbreviations in any section of the application and that they are present here in alphabetical order. So with the phase 2 part of the process, which is all about the professional competences, these are the 5 competencies that make up the main part of phase 2. So as you can see, the 5 competencies are there on the screen. You're writing 500 words on each of these. Like as I said with the career summary section and all other sections, before you start this particular section, please ensure you've referenced the guidance notes, you've used the regulations, and you clearly know what's being asked of you for each of these 5 competences. When you look at the guidance notes, and in addition to the discipline-specific competency documents, you'll see that there's a main definition that you need to demonstrate for each of these competency statements, but there's also sub-competences that you need to be able to demonstrate. So make sure that you, as I said, you're clearly up to speed on what's expected of you to complete this part of the process. And then you're slotting in those key roles, those key projects that help you demonstrate and help you benchmark your own career against each of these sections. So you'll see here that within the competency section, there's 4 sub-competences that you need to be able to demonstrate within the overall 5. So we won't look at these in detail. What I would suggest is that you go to the Chartered page of the website, and as I said, you firstly find out your correct route to a professional title, download the relevant guidance documents and the regulations, and really bring yourself up to speed on what each of these are and also what types of examples have been previously submitted by successful recipients of the Chartered title. With the 3 learning outcomes, again, to clarify, this is just for people who are on further learning. If you're on experiential learning or standard route, you do not complete this section. So the 3 learning outcomes in the middle there, as you can see, are advanced engineering knowledge and understanding, research, and the broadening of expertise. Further learning outcome 1 used to be called design, but it's now changed slightly. And in the bottom there, you can see the word count. That has come down slightly also since we launched our new regulations and guidance notes. So for further learning applicants, you'd be pleased to know that there is a now standalone document that looks at these 3 learning outcomes in that guidance document. So please make sure you bring yourself up to speed on not only the competency section, but also these 3 learning outcomes. So with CPD, I mentioned this a moment ago, kind of at one of the eligibility slides. So it's self-evaluated, and with all applications for a professional title, you need to showcase a minimum of 35 hours of CPD per year, and that has to be in place for a minimum of 2 years before applying. Now, please take note, I do not mean that you need to be a member with Engineers Ireland for a minimum of 2 years. You just need to showcase a minimum of 2 years. So if, for example, you joined Engineers Ireland 6 months ago and you're submitting an application today for argument's sake, you just need to showcase that within those couple of months, you are completing the required hours of CPD, but that even prior to joining Engineers Ireland, whether it was CPD with a different organization in a different country, that you were still meeting that minimum requirement. I would strongly suggest you go back 3, 4, 5 years with CPD. This is your chance now to get all the information down in your application. So it's worth taking the time to go through that. With the application, you'll also be asked to write your future development statements, so your short, medium, and your long-term goals for your CPD. So when filling out the CPD section of the application, there's a few different ways you can do it, and that gives you an idea of what the table looks like. So it's like the career summary report. So the first way you can do it is by importing over your CPD. So your My CPD section of your profile does not marry up with your CPD training table of your titles application until you select Import My CPD. They will pull over then the last 5 years of your CPD records. Please note that the Import My CPD link can only be selected once. So make sure that your My CPD section of your profile is correct before selecting Import My CPD. As I said, it can only be selected once. So that's just if you declare your CPD each year with Engineers Ireland and you have those records on your dashboard, that would be applicable to you to import over your CPD records. If you don't do that, don't worry. If you have an offline record through Excel or your company has a record of your CPD, then what you'll need to do is you'll just have to add in a row by row those CPD records. But it's quite straightforward. You're just filling in 4 sections. So you'll be surprised at how quick you can work through this particular section. The third way you can do it is if you work for an Engineers Ireland accredited employer. So this is just if you are with an Engineers Ireland accredited employer. If you are not, it will only be the 2 other options you can do for adding in CPD records. So again, to clarify, if you work for an Engineers Ireland accredited employer, what you just need to do then for each year that you've been employed with that accredited employer, each year you will add in a line entry. So you will select Add New Row, and then in the first drop-down menu, select Work-Based Learning. You'll then select Accredited Employer in the next drop-down. You'll put in the total number of hours that you did in that particular year for CPD, and the completed date, you can just put in the final date you did CPD within that particular year. So if, for example, you've been with an accredited employer for the last 5 years, you'll just have 5 line entries, each showing the total number of hours you did for that particular year. This slide here gives you an idea of the huge variety of ways as to how you can demonstrate CPD. So whether you're doing lunch and learns, presentations, even viewing this presentation can go with CPD. If you're preparing to deliver a paper or presentation yourself, or maybe some volunteer work, or doing some self-directed learning, you might be acting as a mentor or a mentee, attending conferences or seminars or further education. It can all go towards CPD. Try not to focus in on one particular stream or one particular aspect of CPD. Try showcase a well-rounded approach to CPD. So with applications, you're asked to write 2 essays, and both essays are 500 words each. Your first essay is an engineering topic of your own choice. So spend some time thinking about what you're going to write about. Make sure you've thought through extensively, and it's an area that you can articulate your opinion. Like all sections of the application, your essays will be discussed by your interview panel if you get to the interview stage, to be able to articulate your opinion and kind of discuss in a bit more detail your topic. Your second essay, you'll find them on the Chartered page of the website. So Engineers Ireland choose 5 essay titles at each deadline, and the upcoming January deadlines are on the Chartered page of the website. So with your application, you need to have 2 supporters. So we recommend that your 2 supporters are either chartered engineers with Engineers Ireland or with another professional engineering organization that we have an agreement with. Your supporters have to be familiar with your formation. So by that we mean we cannot source any supporter for you ourselves. You have to be working with them now. You might have worked with them in a different team, in a different organization, or even in a different country. They're all perfectly fine scenarios because they are familiar with part of your formation. So secure your supporters as one of the first things you do in the process and let them know what deadline you're going to be going for. Work closely with them from the outset. As you complete each section of the application, send that off to them for review, get them to identify deficits, offer feedback, and while they're doing that, you move on to the next section. So you're constantly chipping away at that application. That second last point there, if you don't happen to know any chartered engineers, you might only know one. We do accept something that's called an alternative supporter. An alternative supporter has to have an accredited engineering degree as per the Washington Accord. And please take note, if you have an alternative supporter, they must be pre-approved by Engineers Ireland at least 3 months out from a deadline. So please manage your time accordingly if you have an alternative supporter. If you don't give us enough time to have them pre-approved, you won't be able to use them as a supporter. That last point there, we do have a new video launched on the Chartered page of the website, and it kind of discusses FAQs and the role of your supporters. So make sure you are availing of that support and all other supports. With the interview process, so as I mentioned at the outset, you can opt for an online or an in-person interview. There's no right or wrong, just go with what you're most comfortable with. So on your interview panel, there'll be 2 or 3 chartered engineers, and they'll introduce themselves to you straight away. After that, it is over to you to give a 10-minute verbal presentation. We would strongly recommend if it's online, you're doing a screen share, or whether in person, you have slides or a laptop to give your presentation a bit of structure. Like what I said with the written application, with the presentation and the interview, please make sure again that what you are keeping to the forefront of your mind is that this presentation and interview is about you and your career. So highlighting those key roles, those key projects, and how those roles and projects align up with the competencies that you're trying to demonstrate. So keeping those 2 things forefront, front and center, and those slides that you're presenting on showcase how you can benchmark your career to date against those competencies. The remainder of the interview focuses on what you presented on and your written application. Standard and experiential learning route applicants, your interview can last 60 minutes, while further learning applicants can last up to 90 minutes. On the Chartered page of the website as well, you'll find a 2-page document that looks at the interview. So with deadlines, there's 2 deadlines every year. There's always a January, there's always a June. So we'll take the January on the left, which is always the last Friday in January. So if you go for a January deadline, your application is generally assessed in the months of kind of February and into March, and you'll be told then if you've passed the assessment part of the process. But an interview can take place anywhere from March right through to June. The next deadline we have is always the last Friday in June. If someone goes for a June deadline, applications are generally assessed in July and August. Again, you'd be told then if you pass the assessment part of the process for a June deadline, but an interview can take place anywhere from September right through to December. So always the last Friday in January, always the last Friday in June. So look, some final tips. Sometimes people ask how many years of professional experience is required before applying. There's no right or wrong for this or kind of one fixed kind of time frame. Generally, it's a minimum of 5 years, but for a lot more engineers, it can be a lot longer than that due to work commitments, personal commitments. So we would generally put the onus back on you, the applicant, to review the guidance documents, review the discipline-specific competency documents, and see, have you built up the relevant kind of bank of experience and adequate experience that allows you to demonstrate all those sub-competency statements. Also to speak to your proposed supporters, and that'll kind of give you kind of a good kind of ballpark kind of idea as to whether you can apply for the title. That third point, as I said, contact your supporters well in advance of the application before you start, and make sure that they're willing to support you. Um, for all applications, no matter what route you're on, these are written applications only. There should not be any tables, any graphs, any imagery. If they are present, your application will be returned. That last point there, once you kind of confirm in your own head when you're going to apply for it, work back from that deadline date. So confirm to yourself whether it's going to be January or June, and start setting yourself monthly goals. And as the deadline approaches, fortnightly and then weekly goals. So as I said, you're constantly chipping away at that application. You're sending those sections off to your supporters for review, and you're continuing to work through the application itself. So it's completed well in advance of the particular deadline. And hopefully, upon completion of the process, you'll have achieved a professional title. And of course, you'll want to demonstrate that in the professional capacity. So you'll have access to these banners, email signatures, icons, that will be downloadable directly through your membership dashboard for LinkedIn and for your work email as well. So, look, for any questions moving forward after watching this presentation, make sure, as I said, you double check your route to title, download the relevant guidance document, secure your supporters, and avail of all those benefits from the discipline-specific competency documents, and the guidance for the interview, the video that looks at your supporters. After going through all those resources, if you have any questions on any aspect of the application, your route to title, please use the email titles@engineersireland.ie. But if you have yet to become a member, we need you to do that first. And that will be done by using the email membership@engineersireland.ie. So thanks for watching.